Porphyria's lover is in Browning's favoured form of dramatic monologue, although this poem is more of an inner monologue because there is no obvious listener, but nonetheless performs the same purpose as a dramatic monologue. It allows the poet to present psychological insights through the portrayal of a persona's speech and behaviour. In this case, a man who expresses his feelings as his lover comes to visit him one night, and how these feelings lead him to murder her. In the first half of the poem, Browning portrays the speaker as a passive voyeur, obsessively observing his lover without responding to her, and the resentment and self-pity he feels at her resistance to total submission to his desires. The setting of the poem in an isolated cottage lends an ominous intensity to the situation, with Porphyria, as it were, stepping into his lair from which he determines she will never escape. Browning conveys an impression of the speaker as a man enthralled and dominated by his lover. The title of the poem suggests a reversal of contemporary stereotypes, with the speaker having no name, as though Porphyria owns him as an object. The use of the word glided to describe Porphyria's entrance conveys the image of an autonomous supernatural spirit who is not subject to his control. While the speaker sits in an apparently helpless state of misery, Porphyria takes immediate action to light the fire and bring life and warmth to the cottage. She shut the cold out and the storm. She is thus in the traditionally masculine role of protector. This role reversal is further emphasized by the speaker's situation, waiting unhappily for his lover to rescue him from his despondency as he sits by his cheerless grate. The symbolism of her making the fire blaze up indicates the fierce destructive force of the passion she arouses in the speaker, and her agency in lighting the fire is echoed in some of the following lines as she literally manipulates her passive lover. She put my arm about her waist and made her smooth white shoulder bare. In both instances, she is in charge, deliberately attempting to provoke a certain reaction. Browning's detailed descriptions of Porphyria's actions as she withdrew the dripping cloak and shawl, and laid her soiled gloves by, untied her hat, and let the damp hair fall, with its sensual suggestions of intimacy and revealed beauty, convey a strong sense of voyeuristic intensity from the speaker, as he apparently sits and watches her every move, rather than greeting her as one might expect a lover to do. This impression of an unnatural stillness from the speaker, combined with obsessive observation of Porphyria's every move, is further strengthened in the following two lines. And last she sat down by my side and called me. The word last here highlights how the speaker has been passively waiting for Porphyria to take notice of him as he sat watching her, and the disruption of the regular iambic tetrameter by the short phrase and called me followed by a full stop suggests a climax of resentment as he is finally acknowledged. The marked pause in this line, in contrast to the even rhythm in most of the poem, is both an indicator of the significance of this moment and a means of reinforcing the meaning of the following phrase, when no voice replied. The momentary silence forced on the reader is a reflection of the ominous silence of the speaker towards Porphyria, conveying his feelings of brooding obsession. At the same time, there is a suggestion of how this obsession has depleted his own identity, reflected in the passive form of no voice replied, where the speaker is not even given his own pronoun. The bitterness and self-pity that his situation provokes in the speaker is conveyed at the beginning of the poem when Browning uses pathetic fallacy to create a scene that echoes his feelings of malignant gloom. Thus the wind is sullen, attempting to vex and spite all around it, in an ominous foreshadowing of the malicious use of power by the speaker later in the poem. The association of the dismal weather with the speaker is strengthened by the ending of the first ABABB rhyme scheme, with a line focused on the speaker himself. I listened with heart fit to break. There is a sense here that the speaker, in his self-regarding misery, is blaming the world for his ills, just as he later blames Porphyria for her pride in refusing to submit herself entirely to him. There is a sense that the speaker grudges Porphyria's smothering sensuality that seems to subjugate him without any reciprocal submission from her. The repetition of the phrase yellow hair, a symbol of female sexuality, and the fact that it is spread o'er all, suggests his subjection to her powerful charms. This impression is strengthened in the following line with Porphyria murmuring how she loved me. She has a voice, though he has none, so she appears not only in physical terms and terms of will, but also vocally to be dominant. Yet this phrase is followed by a dash, forcing the reader to pause before Browning introduces a significant change in tone. The repetition of the pronoun she, left dangling at the end of the line, has the effect of balancing out the previous she, as though on the scales of justice. Up until this point, the description of Porphyria has been in the vein of a detached observer, that of her helpless, voiceless lover watching as she manipulates him. Suddenly, the tone shifts to one of angry denunciation as he brands her too weak, an ironic phrase given his apparent passivity that perhaps hints at the root of his deadly desire to control her. He seems to resent her power over him and to wish to change reality to fit his own narrative. Hence, he characterizes her as having struggling passion, suggesting the idea of someone feeble and vulnerable, even though a more reasonable interpretation of her actions would be that of strong resistance to temptation. The line, "and give herself to me forever," which follows further criticism of Porphyria's pride, is chilling in its uncompromising desire to reverse their relative positions and possess her entirely, further underlined by the simple, unvarnished language and the finality of the full stop at the end of the line. This sullen complaint gives way to another bout of self-pity, as he describes himself as one so pale for love of her, and all in vain. The vacillation from one mood to another, indicating the dangerous fragility of his psyche, that foreshadows the twisted means he takes to gain dominance later in the poem. As the narrative progresses, the speaker evinces a psychopathic desire to possess her entirely, and so reverse their roles so that he is in the superior position. This change in the power dynamic is marked by the switch from line 31, when the speaker looked up at her eyes, suggesting a submissive posture as though she is above him, to lines 32 to 33, when he states, "At last I knew Porphyria worshipped me." This hyperbolic description of Porphyria's feelings rather suggests a godlike delusion on the speaker's part, but at least in his mind the tables have turned, although the underlying fragility of his ego is suggested by his surprise. The use of the words swell and grew to describe his heart conveys a sense of inordinate pride, and the phrase on line 36, "That moment she was mine, mine," suggests an intense possessiveness with a hint of insanity in the repetition. His crazed determination to own her at that moment by murdering her is expressed in the disconcertingly mundane phrase, "I found a thing to do," with only a slight disturbance in the regular iambic tetrameter caused by the colon that precedes it. This suggests a cold detachment that is chilling and inhuman. His use of her hair in one long yellow string to strangle her is symbolic of his determination to dominate her, since in the first half of the poem it is her yellow hair that is used to enthrall him with its sensuality. This forceful reordering of the power dynamic between them is graphically depicted in lines 49 to 51, when Porphyria's dead body is rearranged so that this time my shoulder bore her head, which droops upon it still, a direct mirror image of their positioning in the first half of the poem when Porphyria had placed the speaker's head on her shoulder. The triumphalist tone of this time is further stressed by the phrase "droops upon it still," which not only suggests the helplessness of the inanimate corpse, but also conveys the sense of permanence of his victory over her by use of the word still, placed at the end of a line and followed by the firm pause of a colon. The speaker not only robs Porphyria of her life, but in an act of supreme possessiveness, he claims to know her will, so that she is deprived even of her autonomous spirit in death, so that the speaker forces her, in his mind, to be a willing victim. Speaking of her head, an image that suggests ownership of an object, he declares it to be so glad it has its utmost will, a gruesome irony that conveys the speaker's morbid determination to own even her thoughts. The macabre picture conjured in line 58, "And thus we sit together now," rendered more appalling by its banal language, is significant because it is only now that he describes them as being together, now that he has taken all power of resistance from her. There is a strong sense that the speaker wishes to refashion Porphyria to conform to his twisted ideas of the ideal woman. Thus, in contrast to the first half of the poem, when she was portrayed as proud, resistant, independent, sensual, in lines 36 to 37, she is described as fair, perfectly pure and good. This is the rather anodyne image of the pretty and virtuous woman that he wishes her to be, and that he is so desperate to preserve that he murders her. The simple, bland language reflects the role of the sweet, non-threatening female that he wishes her to fulfill. The references to her little throat and the smiling, rosy little head in lines 40 and 52 suggest that he regards her as a diminutive, doll-like figure, very much subordinate to his dominant masculinity. The simile of line 43, "a shut bud that holds a bee," reflects the speaker's uneasiness about Porphyria's power to hurt him while she was alive, with her strong spirit and refusal to submit to him. The disturbing image of her dead face, where laughed the blue eyes without a stain, uses language that suggests girlish, almost vacuous innocence, and the speaker's relief that her vibrant soul no longer challenges him. The phrase "without a stain" conveys the idea of his distorted sense of perfection and contrasts with the implications in the first half of the poem that Porphyria is compromised in her virtue, with the imagery of her soiled gloves and her provocative actions. It is significant that it is only after the speaker has determined that she is truly dead, when he has turned her into the worst kind of perverted stereotype of womanhood, a beautiful body without any thoughts or will of her own, that he releases the instrument of death from her neck and gives her a burning kiss. The gruesome image of his passion for a corpse is in stark contrast to his cold unresponsiveness to Porphyria's affection earlier in the poem, and reflects the idea that he wants her merely to look alive, her cheek once more blushed bright, rather than be alive, in an extreme analogy with the sort of oppressive attitudes of some men at that time towards women. The speaker's egotistical desire to transform Porphyria from a woman of doubts and judgment about what was best for her to an adoring lapdog is conveyed in lines 56 to 57. She guessed not how her darling one wish would be heard. He, of course, is her darling one wish. Her only desire is to be with him. The final rhyming couplet, "And all night long we have not stirred, and yet God has not said a word," seems like an attempt to recruit even God into his fantasy for submissive womanhood, perhaps a reference by Browning to the fact that some men sought to use religion to justify their repressive attitude towards women.